Hello and welcome, everyone. And thank you for joining the CTO briefing, The Future of Ransomware Defense. My name is Brad Laporte. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Morphisec, and I am joined with our Chief Technology Officer, the one and only Michael Gorelik. So thank you. And we are setting up a high impact briefing where we'll break down the latest ransomware trends and highlight the evolving attacker techniques. And we'll share key predictions and prevention strategies throughout. And we'll have basically a detailed look into some of the insights, including some of Ransom Hub's tactics, the anatomy of a ransomware chain of attack, and other key insights. So, Michael, thank you so much for joining us. It'd be great to get your background and start diving in.
Yeah, Michael Gorelik. Thank you, Brad, and it's a pleasure to present as always. Michael Gorelik, the Chief Technology Officer and part of the founding team for Morphisec, 20-something years of cyber experience, presenter at DEF CON, Blue Hat, and many other conferences. And this time we'll be discussing ransomware, right? What's the best way to develop the best ransomware solution is really to understand what is the ransomware landscape. Only this way, obviously, you can develop a good defense. So one of the goals right now in this presentation is to cover the 2024 and a bit of 2025 core and ransomware landscape, as Brad already mentioned, but then also discuss a bit about the challenges and the solutions that we are facing with the evolution of ransomware that is expected and will be expected even further with the of AI and other technologies looking forward into 2025, late 2025 and 2026. So starting from 2024 observation, it's important to understand where we stand versus what right now the business of ransomware represents. And as some would expect, some expected that the number of successful ransomware attack as reported decreased a bit. It's again, it's based on the information that is exposed. Not everyone reports about a ransomware attack. You can get that information from known sources like Ransomware Live. You can check insurance claims. You can find out based on different FBI reporting and negotiator private and public businesses. But generally, it should reflect more or less the common ground with regard to what happens with the payments and average requirements or demand from payment by the ransomware operators. And we see that while there is a bit of a decrease with regard to the number of successful ransomware operations, obviously being a business, they need to maintain their revenues. There is a significant increase in the average in the median kind of payouts by the victims to the ransomware adversaries. There is also, according to different reports, around, we'll get to that in the next slide, but around 27% resolution rate in which like quarter of the victims are paying that ransomware. We see some spikes in end of 2024 due to couple of high-profile ransomware attacks. We'll be talking about them, and we would expect that some of those spikes will repeat during 2025. But if we are looking at the general trend line, we are right now at around 200 to 400. We're in 2023, and right now is around 500 to 600,000 average payment. Again, based on the available data, and you may find different ranges overall. If we are looking into Again, I mentioned the resolution, but if we are looking, what is the motivation of the ransomware adversaries, and what is the motivation of the victim to pay out the ransomware payment eventually, or the ransomware demand? And you can find a lot of hints on the motivation, even from the different reports, but also from the chats of the ransomware adversaries themselves. And one of the known cases was the exposure of the chat of Blackbuster and some of the challenges that the adversaries stand with regard to attacking new victims. But in general lines, we see around third of the victims that pay out are paying because, again, they want to avoid the release of the private information that may reflect on their business, on their regulation-wise lawsuits, their obviously brand, and further. While the largest part usually pay out because the backups didn't work well enough. Sometimes they were also encrypted because they are within the same location as the other data, not necessarily offline. Sometimes the backup work, but the delta between the last backup to recovery is too significant, and the business, you have a business lost and loss of operation, which is a significant. And sometimes they just malfunction and do not work appropriately. So really, the different reasons of backups do not operate eventually lead to business disruption, which leads eventually to payments. According to our information, Ransomware Hub was the most prolific ransomware group in 2024. Some other indicators may put Ransom Hub in the same line with Akira Group. But again, it's depending on where you see. It's definitely one of the top two groups that had a significant impact. And this is also one of the reasons why we will cover three groups. One of them will be Ransom Hub, and we will emphasize what are the evolution of those groups and why they are so successful to bypass existing security controls and eventually on different victim environments.
Yeah, these are great insights. I mean, you really hit the nail on the head here, and just to bring this home for everyone, I mean, it's really evident that threat actors are becoming more surgical. Ransomware is one third, arguably one third of all the cybersecurity incidents. But it constitutes almost 40% of all the financial losses from cyber events. So it's a major piece. So we're seeing, if you look at the chart that was just up, where you had kind of that bell curve, it's really resonating around the fact that it's technically less in terms of volume, but they're more significant, and the payments are higher, and the success rate is much higher because of the shift in a lot of the different tactics that I believe you're going to talk about here, Michael. And it's interesting to see, how this has evolved over time. So appreciate that.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. There was definitely much more reconnaissance as part of preparation for ransom attack. Much research, much impersonation, preparedness, and etc. We'll talk about some of those things. And AI also plays a significant role as part of that reconnaissance, social engineering, etc. Just kind of put on the light some of the more significant events during 2024, which again kind of moved the needle, I would say, on average payments, but also share some of the risk. Again, many of those organizations had quite advanced security controls in place. Some have good processes and the right people. But those ransomware groups are still quite advanced, and there's a significant work done behind. And you see that the impact of a ransomware is not necessarily the payment that the victim has done. According to different information, if we are looking at extension, or if I pronounce it correctly, one of the U.S. healthcare providers that lost significant amount of private information. Some say 5.6 million individual records, may get to 16 million individual records, and while not disclosed, potentially also paid some ransomware payment. The overall impact is much larger, and much of this comes from business disruption, the operations themselves, the recovery portion, the 5 or 7 years regulations, and low requirements that come with it. So definitely significant of more than 1 billion impact and losses. And additionally, a great example is the auto dealership, the CDK Global, also significant impact. According again to different sources, they paid the ransomware payment, but the general losses are couple of hundreds, if not
Mhm.
thousands, millions, I don't know, percentage higher, right? If we are talking about 25 millions versus 1 billion collective loss, it's significant. So again, whether you pay or not pay, ransomware is here to stay. It has significant impact, and you need to protect
Mhm.
and be definitely aware of how they work. And this is one of the goals of this webinar, is to share again the details, the technical details. I will not get into the details of the other examples, but just mentioning here Cencora Pharmaceutical, according to different sources, one of the largest payments that have been done during the history of ransomware payments, 75 million. As far as I don't know, we've classified it Logbit, but I think it was Dark Angel, maybe a small mistake, but nevertheless, one of the largest victim, and this may
Yeah.
even increase.
And it's clear that no one is exempt either. I mean, it's across every vertical and every size of organization. So it's mind-blowing to see how much this has grown over the past 10 years. And especially in the size of the ransomware payments that are being issued and demanded, and then the overall cost across the board. I mean, we're talking billions of dollars in losses. It's just completely absurd to think about.
Yeah, so definitely not even close to the investment you need to put in your security control people and processes. And again, just putting things on, while we are providing a solution, obviously it's people, processes, and solutions, right? And tools that you have. It has to be combination with regard to how do you deal with your security control, security posture. So
Yeah.
mentioning 2024, we have to also discuss a bit about what we see in 2025. There are a lot of different events and that happened, but just a couple of uh, significant things that we saw in our customers, at least. I had a couple of cases in which some of my customers were writing me an emails, and basically notify me, hey, we got this mail. It's not email, mail, like physical mail from Bian Lian, sharing that they exfiltrated information about my organization and demand payment. I think it was Bitcoin, not sure. But there was a lot of scare factor, and I had a couple of those customers basically calling me saying, what are we going to do? Luckily, it was again a scam, a fraud, but it just kind of emphasized the fact that you don't even have to be like attacked today the ransomware has so much significant scare factor, and the lack of knowledge and lack of visibility that customers, targets, victims may have regarding their own current posture and current situation. They just don't know if anything was exfiltrated. So if you track those wallets, you see that some people have paid some amounts to those scams, and those scams will increase in trend. You will see more of those coming during the next years because it works, and people are afraid. So please be extra careful, do the appropriate validation, and do not pay if you are not sure 100% that it will recover your help you with recovery and minimize
Mhm.
your business disruption. Um,
Yeah.
Klopp's
So it's
case,
better to
yeah,
always better to prevent it first, right? So,
obviously, yes, yes. But just again, emphasizing, you may have the best security controls, the best people, the best everything. You may still get this mail, physical mail. So you definitely need to take into account and have the right IR plan in place. Be ready for this kind of situations. Um, Clope is a great example. They're kind of like reviving every once in a while. Almost every year they have this wave of new exploitations. Clope usually kind of leverages 0 days in different applications like the known Move It, Progress software, Axelian, obviously, and now the Harmony Clio, very similar kind of. There could be a file server, file monitoring applications, network monitoring applications, etc. You anything that is exposed outside eventually as a server and that has some kind of like a console maybe that is exposed outside of your network can be utilized by attackers for initial access. In this case, more than 80, 90 something events of successful ransomware events are attributed only to a single group, only during the Q1 of 2025. And the time from which you find a vulnerability today, obviously it's short and much significantly due to, again, a lot of automations, AI. In some cases, AI itself finds new vulnerabilities very, very quickly and easily. But from the time you find vulnerability to the time you weaponize it and it gets to your, basically impacts your victims, it's not a month or two. You actually get the whole impact during the first month or two. So immediately as this vulnerability is weaponized. In this case, more than 80, 90 events, successful events, again, only by CLOP. So we not necessarily will see similar successes during the year, but just says it's enough one or two vulnerabilities to penetrate, utilize during those 1-2 months, and have a significant payout to your developer, to the ransomware developers and business operators, let's call it like that. Additional significant event, as I mentioned before, the shutdown of Black Basta, and basically the release by some personnel, the release of the inner chat between the different groups. It has significant amount of information. In your free time, I really recommend to go over that and review that. But kind of in general lines, some of the important things, at least for this webinar, this presentation, I mentioned that there is, again, well, a bit of less maybe attack and more reconnaissance and a more targeting nature. And obviously any industry is targeted today with that regard, even critical infrastructures and others, healthcare, I mentioned before, financials, obviously. But some of the interesting factors of why there is more caution in a way for ransomware operators to attack opportunistically. Regulatory pressure, obviously, more and more regulatory pressure. There's a lot of rebranding to evade the regulations. Regulatory, I mean, with regard to you are not allowed to pay for logbit or something like that. This is the type of pressure that I'm talking about. In some states, you are not allowed to pay. Okay, so it's really dependent on the regulations and the law enforcement and what is the state your business at. Um, so this increases the challenges of getting the payment coming back to developers. Definitely increasing regulations has a good impact. So way to go. Reduce anonymity, we see as successful attempts by the different three-letter agencies, let's call it like that, of compromising infrastructures of ransomware operators. We saw that with Logbit as well, at least for a while. Some of their infrastructure, their payment servers were compromised. Obviously, they rebuild it. It's a ransomware as a service. You remove one component, you have someone else replacing that component. But a lot of arrests, whether it's US, Canada, Israel, Europe, you find operators that work for some kind of Russian ransomware group, and they don't even know that they work for them in some cases. In some cases, they are. And definitely there is a significant effort by the law offices also using more advanced techniques. So way to go. Again, one of the challenges to cherry pick your target better than before. And there is some critical infrastructure focuses on with regard to the agencies, obviously, with right now all this nation geopolitical situation and many compromises of the critical infrastructure. We're talking about a couple of years ago with the colonial, and going forward, we see that in many critical infrastructure, there is more effort done to try and mitigate that risk there. So again, ransomware operators are thinking twice, but they are thinking and they are succeeding eventually. Right?
Yep, they'll find a way. They always will.
Yeah. So very quickly, this is not a slide I want to spend too much time, but just mentioning or reminding, there are different ways for ransomware group to enter into your network. One is, as we are mentioning here, exploitation. It's a stealthy way. You get in quietly. Usually you may get to some kind of a device that is not or cannot be covered by security controls, and then you try to execute a big portion of your attack stages within that place. Social engineering is still there, still a significant portion of the attacks get through social engineering. And today with AI, it's even easier to mislead a person, impersonate. Some of the attackers you see impersonate IT help desks, and may even in a fraudulent way mislead the same IT people and penetrate organizations. And obviously, the dark web is not silent, and credentials are being resold. So info stealers that are deployed within your network are one of the leading ways to eventually re-enter to your network back with the ransomware. So we find out, again, it's a significant impact, and we are frequently publishing information about new info stealers. In many cases, those info stealers lead to resell of your credentials, and with some permutation, some users are using similar credentials on other environments. You get those credentials, do some permutation, add some company name, and you get entry into organization. And this happens frequently. But this slide specifically talks about some of the exploits, stealthy exploits. You'll probably see during the year, as we saw before, the known players like the Netrixes and the Citrixes and others. But again, some of these names are already known to be exploited during this year for purposes of ransomware infiltration.
Mhm. It's crazy how they're just walking through the front door. I mean, between all the
Yeah,
credentials and account takeovers and vulnerabilities and misconfigurations, they're able to just navigate through all the holes just like Swiss cheese.
yeah, it's scary because like in most cases, until you get to patch something, they're already in. So what is your compensatory controls, right?
Mhm.
What is your second layer or your last layer of defense? Um, this is definitely something you would need to think about. Patching so quickly is almost impossible, and I believe my personal prediction,
Mhm.
and again, my team finds vulnerabilities. You just need to wait during this year. We're going to release something very big. But even if you look at the previous year, the 8 remote code executions of Outlook, some of them have been identified with the help of AI. Like instead of spending a year at the
Mhm.
NSA for one vulnerability, you spend a week with your, I
Yeah,
don't know, Grok, your Chat GPT, your Cloud, or your Claude, let's call it the Claude or whatever, any of those many agents that you have in your belt.
it's scary.
Uh,
It's very scary.
yeah, yeah. So you have to think about compensatory, or am I pronouncing it correct? I'm always wrong.
Compensating controls.
Compensating controls. Okay, this is the recording. So now is kind of the highlights for me at this for this webinar. We are going to talk about very quickly about 3 strains of ransomwares. Each one is unique, and each one demonstrates the challenges that victims or companies face when attacked with ransomware. So Mimic is a great example. I personally uh, like to analyze this sample, very much advanced. We have more information recently that we collect about the different uh, marketplaces and the interaction of the developers themselves. We're going to release it soon with some of our researchers about who stands behind Mimic. But at this time, we are more focusing on the Mimic itself and some of the interesting parts of Mimic, I would say. One of the more advanced ransomwares that I had the opportunity to reverse engineer is the fact that it operates with different instances, different processes. So while you would expect of a normal ransomware a while ago to have a process, whether it's a legitimate injected process or whether it's malicious process, to be a single process that does the encryption, does the propagation, the enumeration, all this tactics of a ransomware. Here we are talking about delegation of responsibilities. One process responsible for enumeration of your folders, another for the propagation to your network, another for the encryption, and even that one is split to 2 processes. Why does it work so successfully? Because again, if you look at different EDRs or behavior detection, you're looking at patterns, patterns that accumulate to a specific vector decision making, which you have AI behind and says, okay, this is malicious enough. Let's do something about it. But when you break those patterns to different other processes, suddenly you don't have a single entity that is doing just enough to be classified as malicious. I would say even further, this process itself, Mimic, has a recovery mechanism. So even if you are, as an EDR, you're killing that process, basically tampering, it has an agent that recovers the same process from a given state and continues the encryption. So quite advanced stuff. It does propagation as you would expect with admin share enumerations and some of the others. Most of the ransomwares today automatically propagate within your network. You don't need even adversaries for that. You just need some misconfiguration, and that's it. It works whether through SMB or administrative shares or others. We'll mention more. And I mentioned here a couple of interesting evasions. Like if you would expect before some tampering or killing of defender, as an example of a security control, it's much easier to add exclusion rules because while there is a significant effort done by the security alliance to try and introduce anti-tampering against their processes, some additional APIs or capabilities are not necessarily included or well included in those anti-tampering capabilities. So instead of killing a process, you can just exclude your ransomware from scanning or exclude your ransomware from being killed. And this is exactly what they do, and some other ransomware are doing. Tampering of forensics, you see it more and more, but they're really, let's say, aggressive with that. It becomes very important to understand where your forensic will be after the ransomware. So many of the companies say, okay, we have a ransomware, now we'll call incident response so we can contain that event. But how do you contain or even identify what is your zero patient if you don't have the forensics in your hand, the indicators, the event logs, the registries, the catalogs, the recycle bins, all those indicators that a good incident response team uses to help you identify and say, okay, close this firewall rules, isolate that machine, it's coming from that, and you just become without hands and legs, and you cannot do anything. And this is exactly what ransomware, this ransomware and other ransomwares are doing, removing event logs, removing catalogs, recycle bins, overriding itself and then removing itself, etc. So you would expect that to be done by others. Exfiltration is being done through the browser, to the Mega, but again, there are other ways to do that as well. Some of the tools I would say that are repeating between the different ransomwares that you would expect, NetScan, I would say, while others are used in different, depending on what security controls you have, then you have the relevant tools are dropped. NetScan is used in almost every ransomware campaign that I analyzed, many of them, and it's used also by IT tools to enumerate your networks. So we talked about Mimic, which was very advanced with regard to breaking your detection patterns and evading the existing security controls, but still executing on the endpoint and encrypting very, very quickly, so that when you will finally find out that you are encrypted, it will be too late. In case of ShrinkLocker, I actually had the opportunity to analyze it just 2 weeks ago, I think, but it's there for a while. The whole point here of evasion, and it's also quite a scary factor, is abusing your own security controls, in this case, BitLocker, for the encryption itself. So even if you don't have that enabled, even if you don't have the right TPM, this Visual Basic script knows how to enable that without the support of TPM. And basically, minimize the partition, allocate 100 megabytes on each and every of your drives, and as a bootable partition, transfer bootable drives, generate randomly a password, and again, without using APIs that you would intercept, but using known phrases that cover the whole alphabet. And eventually lock you out of your own environment. In this case, had the victim with 10 such servers encrypted. Again, it's not the attacker didn't come from nothing. They still executed some reconnaissance tools that you have to monitor with regard to exposure visibility. There were some additional operations on the environments that you would like to prevent earlier. But if we are talking about potential recovery of encrypted files, we have nothing to talk about. Obviously, there is no encryption of files. Talking about BitLocker, encrypting the access to your this and throwing away, by the way, the protective keys that the special recovery mechanism. So again, there are some trend right now with regard to recovery, which is important, but recovery of files wouldn't help here in this case. Let's continue with Ransom Hub, of course, the most prolific ransomware, right? And we
Very
wrote
popular.
about, yeah, very popular. And we wrote about that and provided a significant coverage. Just again, just to put things in place. As any other ransomware, it has stages, tactics. Morphisec prevents it very early at the elevation of privileges before it gets to exfiltration or encryption or propagation. But just kind of like mentioning that, yes, we could stop it later and try to recover files, but obviously the earlier you stop it, the more you buy time, the better, the quicker you recover your business, the less you have a business disruption, right? So some of the interesting techniques that allow ransom hub so easily evade existing security controls, and also some other ransomwares adopt similar kind of techniques in the execution through SafeBoot. Right. So how many security solutions operate within SafeBoot? Not many, especially with the mega cluster event with the CrowdStrike. Over a year already. I don't know how much time passed by when there were blue screens everywhere. And the only way to recover was through SafeMoon. I know that Microsoft invests a lot into different technologies that will avoid the execution of kernel drivers, but it will probably take a nevertheless, security controls have a lot of IP in kernel, and they have to provide you a way out if something screws up. So safe mode is a way out, and attackers are not stupid. They know all the ways out, and they leverage that. So they execute the ransomware during and after rebooting into safe mode, which basically removes automatically your security controls. In this case, actually, Morphisec is one of the only solutions that operate in safe mode. You can opt out, of course, but it's by default in. So with that regard, what this ransomware is doing, even if you have disabled local administrators, which is a good practice, by the way, they elevate their privileges with advanced COM elevation. They validate prior to that your Windows supports that elevation, and those are some of the things that is very difficult to patch. They're actually not even classified as vulnerability, but more as a misconfiguration. And then they, by the way, default misconfiguration that is working always. So they've used this COM to elevate themselves, re-enable local administrators, reset their passwords in the registry for auto login, and then just restart in SafeBoot so that your machine restarts not even as a domain machine, but as a local administrator machine, fully encrypted, and nothing you can do with that because you also didn't have any security controls in place. So definitely quite advanced evasion technique, but ransomwares are using that. They are also quite aggressive. They know to identify virtual machines that run on the same environment. If you're using some kind of software hypervisor, they do the self-deletion, obviously the forensic disruption, which I mentioned just prior to that. And they have a very interesting language based targeting, and basically whitelisting 18 languages, Russian, Chinese, and this kind of stuff, and then abort their operation if it's a default setting within your environment. So this demonstrates only some of the advanced evasions, but obviously there are additional evasions on the encryption itself. If you try to intercept keys, there are additional evasions that are known to be used, like bring your own vulnerable drivers in some cases are used as well. Tampering of telemetry, it's almost every second ransomware is doing that. So let's assume for a second that you have the top 3 EDRs and you cannot disable them, and you have a great anti-tampering. What they are doing is tampering the telemetry that is used for detection. So you may have the best EDR, which is important to have, but if the telemetry doesn't come, there is no basis for detection or develop your classification, behavior detection. And some of the things they tamper with AMSI, which is the Microsoft like an interface. It's like a consumer producer used for detecting obfuscated scripts and interpretation of .NET commands, ETWs, which are used by most of the security vendors to do detection from within Cypress, etc., and many other tampering that I'm not going to cover at this presentation. I did mention some of them here, but one interesting technique was actually introduced just, I think, 2 weeks ago, and something we should definitely look at. Couple of years back, I don't know if many of you remember, some of the techniques to compromise security controls were by deploying a weaker security control. And then they were catching this slot. There's suddenly you have some kind of like a thin version of, I don't know, I don't want to get into problems, but a thin version of McAfee, thin version of Malwarebytes, something like that, were deployed, replacing the existing security control automatically by Microsoft itself. And great, you can run your malicious stuff and nothing bad happens. And some guys actually reversed the mechanism that allows that to do, and they, I think it's defend not or something. Yeah, defend not technique that was published around 2 weeks ago that allows this replacement for something funny. You don't even need like a security control anymore. You can replace the existing security controls by leveraging this undocumented APIs. You guys should check it. Definitely interesting tampering techniques for your security controls. For ransomware, we're talking a lot about encryption, but I mean, if you wipe out your files, you may have all the keys in the world, you have nothing to recover. And wipers are definitely there, especially on more advanced critical infrastructure companies. So you need to think about this kind of prevention as well. Hypervisor level encryption, the 6i, right? And this kind of cases, they definitely work. And then also very challenging to protect against partition tampering, etc. So a lot, and we are actually close to the time, so we'll continue. So a lot of scaring factors so far, right? What do we do with that? How can we protect? So you have the natural basic security layered approach, but we all understand that your EDRs, your perimeter securities, and others, they are there to protect generally about all your kind of attack vectors. And when you try to invest into everything, you don't really do great at specific thing. You try to do everything at some level. And with this attack vector becomes so significant, as you mentioned, Brad, third of the impact. You have to have a dedicated solution. So this is
Yep.
exactly a dedicated solution and dedicated layer for that purpose. So if your existing security controls, in most cases, they are bypassed, and I didn't talk about 50% of additional bypasses like side loading, DLL hijacking, not mentioning that. You have to have a dedicated anti-ransomware control. And if you look at this dedicated control, which we represent in Morphisec as the dedicated anti-ransomware solution, we have to look on ransomware not only as the stage that encrypts your files. I just mentioned many stages that are as critical as encryption. In some cases, the encryption will not happen. The exfiltration will happen, right, as I mentioned. And third of the people that pay out, they pay out because of exfiltration. So it's very important to
Yep.
look at ransomware at pre-execution, during ransomware execution, and obviously if things go havoc, go everything goes not as you plan, you also need to recover. You need to help your team to recover your business and minimize the disruption. And this is exactly how Morphisec approaches ransomware with our solution, platform solution. We invested for a while into prevention. This is our core capabilities, and we're using advanced technologies like moving target defense, or in this case, automated moving target defense, as Gartner, to block a significant amount of ransomwares before you get to encryption. By using deception, for example, implanting different booby traps that ransomware would target during the different stages, whether it's encryption stage, whether it's elevation stage, whether it's even credential theft stage. And obviously, we will not get into each and every tactic, but only the prevention is a significant enough factor in which all the focus is around ransomware. So if you want to prevent ransomware early, this is the place you want to invest. Pre-execution, you don't want to get to prevention. You want to minimize your attack surface. I mentioned that ransomware automatically propagate through administrative shares. Ransomware automatically propagate through SMBs. Ransomware automatically exploit SMB1, SMB2 still if you have that in your environment. Do COM elevations, etc. So quite a lot of different tactics even before they get to encrypt, and all this within the ransomware itself, not even the adversaries that work behind and manipulate that. So you do want to understand how much of an attack surface you have and how much you want to minimize, how many of vulnerabilities you have, how many of the applications are end of life, not supported, how many browser extensions that can be leveraged for info stealing purposes. All that information we at Morphisec provide as pre-execution visibility so that you can minimize specifically your ransomware attack surface. And then the leftovers will get to prevention. But if anything goes not as you planned, and the ransomware eventually succeeds to encrypt some of the files and penetrate through prevention, in some cases can exist, no one is foolproof, then obviously we introduce right now the recovery of files that were encrypted, those that are still encrypted while the ransomware is prevented. But also very important mechanisms that we'll be discussing very soon that will help all the incident response team to contain and minimize your business disruption, the recovery of the indicators that are used to identify the zero patient, used to identify what exactly happening on your environment before the ransomware tampered with those. And again, bundling a lot of our experience and services that comes together with the prevention. So this is the right approach from our side and our aspect. And understanding that you have EDR, in many cases, many of our customers have the top EDRs. I would say, I don't want to split the percentages, but a significant portion have Microsoft, others have Sentinel, have CrowdStrike. All those names are known. There are great things that those solutions are doing, especially helping you with your recovery, with your identification of the incident itself, hunting, response capability. A lot of emphasis on the response. A lot of behavior detection. It helps you to identify what do you need to contain, how do you want to isolate. But again, with regard to early prevention, the mechanisms are still, I would say, didn't change a lot during the past couple of years because a lot of the investment has been done on response. And Morphisec provides exactly that with the early prevention of ransomware, the recovery from ransomware, the prevention of encryption, early prevention of encryption, and many other, as I mentioned before, exfiltration and etc. While the ADR focusing on everything, focusing on ransomware, right? And for that purpose, we also have integration in place with solutions like Microsoft. You can go both ways and basically see and have escalations from Morphisec within your Microsoft consoles, your best EDRs, consoles that you do hunting. You will see suddenly prevention from Morphisec and automatic triangulation. And the same going back if you're using lower tier Microsoft, then you can see all the events within the Morphisec console, and obviously any other integration through APIs. This is just a small example of visualization of your attack surfaces before ransomware happened, and there are much more that we definitely recommend you guys to check out and get a demo from our team. Brad, you want to mention something before kind of jump to some of the example visibility factors?
Yeah, I mean, the key point here is having that unified view and having a look across all of your environments and having a central point for anti-ransomware specifically in addressing this. So, rather than swivel seating across different elements, you're able to tackle the specific use case right here and identifying all the root points that you talked about to get into an environment, whether it be vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, high-risk software, or just knowing what your software inventory is. So, well, right here. So you go.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, while we do have most investment in prevention of ransomware, as I mentioned before, we have an agent in place and we have the visibility to all those things, not only to those that are installed, but everything that runs. And obviously consolidating that and bundling that in one solution, in one platform is crucial. Understanding what is your shadow IT and what is your softwares that you have no clue that are running and vulnerable, it's important. We obviously correlate it with additional threat sources to emphasize what is really exploitable and what are the misconfigurations that are really relevant for ransomware. And then obviously after that, if the ransomware goes through, we have the prevention in place and the recovery in place. I leave you with questions or feedbacks so far.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, Michael, thank you so much for this master class and how what right looks like as it pertains to ransomware defense. So I certainly learned a ton, and I've been doing this for 20 years. But you're truly an expert in the space. While this session's been going on, there's been a flood of questions that have come in. I've identified kind of a couple that we can tackle in the next couple of minutes, but I think this is probably a good starting point. But how can companies identify if they are a high value ransomware target? What are some logical starting points? I mean, basically, how do you even where do you even start at that point?
That's a good question, and it's a hard question to answer because I saw small
Hmm.
law offices with 5 people the previous year targeted by Akira and paying $1.5 million dollars, eventually paying. And it's interesting that even I didn't mention that, but the tier modeling, there's a lot of innovation for ransomware operators. They have a very nice tier modeling in which you can pay for the crypto, and then for them sharing with you how they entered, and for them not to re-enter again, and for them again. It's a full tier model, and you see small companies paying all those amounts because they have a very sensitive private information, like law offices, like service companies, healthcare have private information, financials, home, and they have definitely information that you don't want to disclose. So companies that have a significant something to lose, which are most of the companies, most of the industries,
Yeah, right.
may become a target. And some time ago, I remember when the ransomware demand was around like 10% of revenues, etc. They know how to check in the books. And
Correct.
definitely increases right now significantly. So if you have significant revenues, um, then it's definitely a target. Yeah.
Cool. What they'll do is they'll go after the insurance agency. They know the policy is up to $5 million or $1 million or whatever it is, and well, guess what? That's what it ends up being. Because they know that you can pay, and if you hit enough of those check boxes, you open the door, and well, that's what maximizes the the payment being issued. Um,
Right.
Great answers, great insights. The next item I think is important, which is, there's a lot of like you said, an organization with 5 people, very lean, leveraging a lot of managed service providers, MSSPs, to help out. But at the end of the day, you have to prioritize. So, since so many ransomware groups are exploiting unpatched vulnerabilities, how can they prioritize when they just don't have those resources? What can they do in the meantime? We kind of touched a little bit on that, but I hope to get some additional insights.
Yeah, I think we are working with a lot of MSPs and MSSPs, and we see that base security stack, EDR, maybe some perimeter, and then they are obviously adopting Morphisec, and in most of the ransomware cases, we see the CDR being bypassed. So MTD, moving target defense, for purposes of ransomware prevention becomes the base, the core package that you would require in your core proposition to your customers through MSP and MSSPs. This is what I see more and more. MSPs are looking for a dedicated ransomware solution.
Hmm.
EDR, it has to be there as well as part of the proposition, as well as some kind of perimeter solution as well as a core technology, and some kind of like email solution as well. I mean, I think those are core building blocks for a proper security stack.
Yeah, I mean, it's evolving into ransomware protection as a service effectively, and a lot of managed detection response offerings are leveraging this. A lot of managed service security service providers and even managed service providers as they evolve into MSSPs. So, um, with 1 minute remaining, is there any key takeaways or last pieces of advice you'd like to share with the attendees today?
I mean, it's better to be prepared early than later, and it's already late. So if you
Yeah.
still don't have it's like it's the same like with the AI, right? If you're not using AI, you're behind. So if
Hmm.
you're if you don't have a dedicated ransomware solution, you are behind, and it's just a matter of time. So you may have the best security stack and hardening and everything, but again, the ransomware operators are not stupid, and they definitely have the same solutions that you have in their labs.
Yep.
Very
It's not a
predictable.
question of if, it's when. So
Yeah.
the more you get ahead of it, the lower the blast radius and impact that you might have. So focusing in on cyber resiliency and being adaptive is absolutely a more preemptive approach. So thank you everyone for attending our webinar today. Thank you so much, Michael, for the masterclass. We appreciate it. This was recorded and will be shared out. Thank you.